Okay, every season of Doctor Who reviewed. I'm going to start with Classic Who, so it's going to be 26-part series. Haven't even watched remotely close to that. I haven't seen more than one complete season, actually, which is the one I'm going to talk about today. But I was going to do this first video as a bit of an introduction to the series, but I'm just going to compile it all into the first part. So we're going to go through every single season of Classic Who, season 1 to 26, talk about all of the stories in there, my thoughts on them, what I think the best and the worst is, and then we're going to do a ranking of it. And then as the series progresses, we're going to rank each season in like a leaderboard, and we're going to see where everything moves as we get down. So for the first bit, it's going to be quite simple, but when we get probably past season 10 and into like the, to the 20s, we're going to have quite a leaderboard that's going to be moving around quite a lot. So like I said, this is my first full season I've actually watched of Classic Who. I've been watching it since probably 2018, so it's been a while, but it's been very on and off and very disjointed. And my old approach to watching it was very much just whatever story I wanted to buy a HMV, buy it, watch it, move on to another one. But more recently, I've opted to just, I've got so many left to watch, I'm just going to watch them in order. So the minute I'm just moving through, I started with Power of the Daleks, and then I'm just moving on from there, because I bought all of the season 4 animations that I've been missing over the past few years. So I've kind of missed a lot of the season 2/3 Hartnell stuff that I hadn't already watched before. But there's one story in season 1, it was Reign of Terror, I hadn't seen yet. So I watched that, and then I've got a full knowledge of everything in this season. I'm going to discuss it all now. So this is season 1 of Doctor Who. These are all the DVD releases. There's 7 DVDs, I think, but there's 8 stories because Marco Polo is obviously missing. I have listened to the narrated audio track, so I do have thoughts on it, and I will be putting my opinion for Marco Polo up there. But let's start off with the first story. Okay, so the first story of season 1, the first story ever, we have An Unearthly Child. So this is a 4-part story. It's the introduction to everything. It's the introduction to Susan, it's the introduction to the Doctor, and then Ian and Barbara, who are the companions that are going to be with the Doctor and Susan throughout this whole season. And into a little bit of season 2 as well. So An Unearthly Child is very often considered as episode 1, like 10 out of 10, stellar, phenomenal. Episodes 2, 3, 4, bit shit. I don't disagree with that. I think episode 1 objectively is the strongest. Episodes 2, 3, and 4 are a little bit weak. But I've got a lot of nostalgia for this one. This is the first classic story I ever saw. I did go back to the beginning originally and started watching this one. And I'm really happy I did. You know, when you think about it it is very hard to fully grasp episode 1, I think, in terms of how influential it was. But if you just imagine it as a 1963 viewer, and we don't know anything about Doctor Who, we don't know who the Doctor is. This is just an alien who is called the Doctor. It really, really changes everything. I do quite like parts 2, 3, and 4. It is a very interesting insight to how the evolution of the Doctor's character started. Obviously, I think it was in this story, he tried bashing that guy's skull in, or was that the Daleks? I think it might have been this one. And then I think this is where he's smoking a pipe as well. So there's a few weird quirks in the Doctor's character, which while are dropped quite quickly, it does show an insight that the Doctor's not a hero, especially not at this point. That's not who he is. It's how these people influence him to becoming better. But yeah, An Unearthly Child, it is when you take away how revolutionary the story is and how, important it is for the history of the show, when you actually watch it, it's not phenomenal. Parts 2, 3, and 4, while I do think they are slightly underrated, they do drag a little bit. And for a 4-part story, it does drag a little bit. And for me, if we take off the, it is the first ever story glasses, if a 4-part story is dragging, you've got to be doing something wrong, because there's some 4-part stories there's 6 parts that go like that, and you got 4 parts that is standard, in my opinion. But An Unearthly Child, it's a decent Doctor Who story. It's nothing crazily special. It's just good, and obviously with it being it's the first one, what it actually did for the show, is okay. So did I give it a rating for An Unearthly Child? 6 out of 10. If I didn't, 6 out of 10 for that one. Next up, the Daleks. First appearance of, you guessed it, the Daleks. So it's a 7-part story. Funnily enough, it's one that's rated a 12. I'm not entirely sure why, but yeah, the Daleks is a 7-part story, so it's a long one. I would say a lot of 6-part stories in classic, particularly some of the 60s ones, a lot of the 6-parters can drag a lot. So this for a 7-part is no exception. It is a long one, and it really does feel long. Again, I think it does suffer a little bit from an unearthly child perspective, well, a little bit similarly to an unearthly child in the sense of it's not phenomenal in some parts of it, but the fact it's the first, it gets away with a lot. And I do think you do have to give some leeway because it's still finding its footing with the Daleks and all that, but I think it gets away with more than any other Dalek story would. But the Thals are really interested in this. I think it does definitely portray them very much as the good guys and the Daleks are bad, which, we would later on learn that it wasn't that black and white, but it works in this story, in my opinion. It's very interesting, the first episode, and again, back on what I was saying on Unearthly Child, the Doctor's not the hero here, but he is still very much that curious, scientific mind, and it's his curiosity that gets them into the situation they're in, and the Daleks, when they're stuck in there, and then they get obviously entrapped by the Daleks, and then I can't remember who escapes. I want to say it's Susan who escapes, and then goes back to the TARDIS, and then obviously there's the issue with the radiation as well. So you've got the Daleks trapping them, you've got the radiation. There's a lot going on, and it does feel like there's a lot of stakes. While it is quite long, and it does definitely drag on quite a bit, it is a very strong premise and a very strong story, and it's the first appearance of the Daleks. So for me, this is a 7 out of 10. It's definitely an improvement on Unearthly Child. I don't think it's the best story of season 1, but it's definitely up there. It's one of the better ones, and it is one I do want to give a rewatch. But for the first one, it is really solid, and I am a fan of it. Okay, so next up, story number 3, we have The Edge of Destruction. So this is the last part of the beginning box set, and it's only a 2-part story. Now, for me, this is one of the most underrated stories, potentially in Doctor Who ever. Now, I'm not saying it's a brilliant story. I definitely think it's potentially the weakest of the first 3. Potentially, it's a little bit better than Unearthly Child, but it is very short. But it feels like the first 3 stories are their own little arc. Now, I know from a production standpoint, there were those 13 episodes, and it did have to fill that, and obviously, 4 plus 11 from Unearthly Child and Daleks did leave 2 for The Edge of Destruction, but it does feel like it quite nicely wraps everything up. I don't know if that makes sense. From, an Unearthly Child, they're taken away by the Doctor, and it's quite a hostile environment, and the Daleks, they have that big adventure together, and there's some really big threats. It feels like The Edge of Destruction really does kind of wrap it all up, and they become a little bit more civil with each other, ready to go into Marco Polo to then go on the rest of the adventures that they have in the TARDIS together. It's nothing special. It's a little 2-part story, but it's a very nice character piece in terms of it just feels like it's getting everyone acquainted with each other, and everyone, gets on a little bit more from it. Like I say, it's not a perfect story. It's really not, and it's never going to be a standout one. But I think for what it does and what it needed to be, it's brilliant. It closes off that nice little beginning segment, and it almost feels like it goes into the second part of season 1 then, where you have all these big adventures. But yeah, I really like it. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's not, like I say, it's not a phenomenal Doctor Who story, and it's never going to go down as one of the greats, but what it does, I think it does do really, really well. And it's nice to have these first 3 at least, in the archives and not lost. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for this one. Okay, so the next one we're talking about, we don't have a DVD for, is Marco Polo. Now, I listened to this on Audible, so I don't have any physical media for it, but it's a 7-part story, and while it is very, very long, this one is brilliant. This one is really, really, really good. I think even though it is long and it does take a while to get through, it doesn't feel like it drags. It's very similar to another story that's going to come up later, actually. It does feel every single episode, if I remember, it's been a few years since I listened to it, but every single episode is in its distinct little location, and the Doctor and team move about with Marco Polo in each episode. So there's a lot that changes, and there's a lot that goes on. I think, I can't remember what the villain's called in this, the one who poisons the water, I think in part 4 or 5, I can't remember what his name is. I can't see his performance, so he's acted really, really well. It feels like a really, from the first 3 shots, it feels quite grand, it feels quite big, it feels like on this huge adventure of discovery. And then it's been a while, so I don't remember all the names, but the girl that was quite close with Susan, you feel really, really awful for her with what's happening. But it is a really, really good Doctor Who story. I think if this one was to be animated, which I know would be a massive job, or if this one were to be found, I think it is already really well regarded, but I think a lot of people aren't a fan of audio, which I'm not the biggest, or definitely not telesnaps. I think making it more accessible, I think Marco Polo would definitely go down as like top 3 Hartnell stories and one of the best of the classic era, 100%. Marco Polo has so much potential. If it were to ever be found or ever be animated, it really is phenomenal. It just has got that limitation of no visuals, and it is a limitation. So Marco Polo, it's been a while. I would be down to give it a re-listen. I just think without the being able to watch it, I think that does hinder how much I'd want to rewatch it. And rewatchability is really important with Doctor Who, especially classics when they're so long. But I'm gonna give Marco Polo an 8 out of 10. It is really, really, really phenomenal. I think if this one were to ever have any visuals for it, whether it be animated or, ideally it's actually found, however unlikely, I think this would be a really, really good story. I think this would be regarded as one of the best as the Harnell era. So yeah, Marco Polo, we'll give it number 8 out of 10. Okay, so the next one we have is the Keys of Marinus. Now this one's really good actually. It's another 6-parter. I say another actually, I think it's the first 6-parter of the season, isn't it? Yeah, it's the first 6-parter. But it's another long one, is more so what I mean. So this one's really interesting because, especially parts 2, I think it's 2, 3, 4, and 5, they are like their own little self-contained stories, and I quite like that, even though they are very much part of this big Keys of Marinus arc, and that they have to go around and collect a key each location. Episode 2 is a bit like a Roman society that's been controlled, and you've got episode 3, which is about like some failed experiments with plants and some, vines and DNA and things like that. I can't remember what episode 4 and 5 exactly about off the top of my head, but it's a very, very interesting episode. It's a really, really good one. I think it wraps everything up really well in the final part. I think, on the whole, it's just a really good Doctor Who story. I think that, even though it's nice that each of the locations change a lot, it's really, really cool in that sense. And it's a really good one. It's a little bit long, but I think it's paced really well, especially with, the different sets and all that throughout. But yeah, this one, I don't even have much to say on this one. It's been a while since I've watched it, I will say. But it is just a really solid story, I don't think... It's one thinking about it, I think it's a little bit better. I don't think it's quite as good as Marco Polo, but I think it's better than the Daleks. So I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I don't really do 0.5s and whatnot, but I feel like it's fair in this case because I don't think that... Yeah, I think it's better than the Daleks, but I don't think it's as good as Marco Polo. So I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. Alright, up next, the Aztecs. Now, this is going to piss people off. This is going to piss some of you off big time. It's alright. The Aztecs is alright. But that's it. I don't see it. I don't see how it's one of the best Harnell stories. I don't see how it's one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time, which is definitely what I've heard before. It's one of those things that I think it's really interesting to see some of the modern Doctor Who ideologies in the past, like the whole, this is the big introduction of, you can't change the past. And, how the Doctor and Barbara clash, which has happened with the Doctor and many a companion before, when, a companion wants to change history and wants to try and save people. The Doctor's like, no, you can't do it. You have to keep the time stream flowing. And that's a very interesting concept. And what's the villain's name? Can't pronounce it. It's got an X in it somewhere. It's on the back. Whatever it's called. Is it Colossal or something like that? I don't know. He's quite good in this. He's really well acted. And they say he's a good Doctor Who story. But it ain't getting a 9 or a 10. Like I've heard some people say. I find it's just okay. It's alright. Like I say, it's better than An Unearthly Child, but I wouldn't even say it's better than Daleks, and I'll put that 7 out of 10. It's just a decent story, and that's it for me. And I'll give it a 6.5. We're already in with these 0.5s now, but I'm going to 6.5 because it's just decent. I mean, it's a gorgeous cover, I will say. That is really nice, but that's it's just a decent Doctor Who story, and I think Barbara is good in it, and I do think William Hartnell is really good in it as well. But it's just good. It's not one of the exceptional ones of this season. Let's put it that way. Okay, up next, the penultimate story of season 1 is the Sensorites. Now, the Sensorites was, I don't know if any of you guys know, the old BBC Doctor Who website with like the 8 Doctors on it, and you could go through all the classic episodes. The Sensorites as a villain, as a design, stuck out to me like when I was a kid. Don't know why, so I was well excited to watch this. It's alright. I think, it very similar to An Unearthly Child. It gets the part 1's great, parts 2 to 6 are crap. And I actually don't agree with that. I think part 1 is... part 1's a little bit... It's alright. It's definitely interesting. The cliffhanger's really, really good. Don't get me wrong, cliffhanger of part 1's sick. But I think some of the acting in part 1, especially with the guy that's mentally ill, I can't think what his... Not mentally ill, but he's being controlled by the Sensorites and he's going a bit crazy. I can't think what his name is. Is it John or something? But didn't really click with me. I think it's an interesting one. It's a bit of a political one, about the society and that they're trying to overthrow the leader and all that. And it is a little bit dull. It's definitely not one especially from season 1, but even from the William Hartnell era, that I'm flying back to see. It's really not, but it's decent. I would rate it similarly to the Aztecs, to be honest. Aztecs is potentially a little bit better, but yeah, I really wouldn't. I find it a hard one to rate, because sometimes when I'm watching it, I really enjoy it, but then other times I think it just drags. I think I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, same as An Unearthly Child. I think, yeah, it's a decent Doctor Who story. It's nothing crazy. I find it a hard one to rate, this one, though. Right, and then for the final story of season 1, we have The Reign of Terror. Now, I'm gonna say this is my favorite of the season. This is good. You know, I was really shocked by how much I liked this one. You know, I don't expect a lot from the pure historicals, and I think that's kind of a bad thing, because I've liked a lot of the ones I've watched. But The Reign of Terror is really good. In contrast to Marco Polo feels like this really bright, really vibrant atmosphere. It's such a cool sense of adventure, and such, you know, it feels so grand. The Reign of Terror is dark and grim, and just straight off the bat in episode 1, you feel like the characters have got no way out of it, and throughout the whole story, you just can't see a way out for these guys. You know, in the cliffhanger for episode 1, you know, a bit of a spoiler warning, but you know, the Doctor's lying there when the building's on fire, and he's passed out, and you know, they've all, you know, Susan, Barbara, and Ian, I was going to forget who they are then. Susan, Barbara, and Ian, you know, they're with the rebels, and they've been found, and then they've been captured, and it's just all of a sudden, it just feels really dark straight away, and throughout the story it does. What I will say about The Reign of Terror is it is easily, without doubt, the worst animation. It is shit. It is the worst animation by far. I mean, when was this released? 2013. So it wasn't I don't know if it was the second animation or not. I know the first one was The Invasion, but yeah, The Invasion animation is way better. It's not great. But I feel like the sets are well enough established, because I think if these were not episodes 4 and 5, I think it would be worse off. But with it being episodes 4 and 5, you have those first 3 to get an understanding of all of the sets and what all the characters look like. There is a character that's more prevalent in parts 4, 5, and 6 than they are in the first 3. So when they start to become more prevalent, you're looking at the animated version and it doesn't really look great or like the person it's supposed to be. But these are all minor gripes that I can accept, because ultimately the animation team are trying their best and they are trying to recreate something that doesn't exist. So with its either face of this, in my opinion, poor quality animation, or nothing, or a telesnap reconstruction, I'll snap your hand off for this poor animation any day of the week. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good. It's really dark. You know, the cast, the supporting cast are phenomenal. I think Jules is a really interesting character. The stuff with Leon, I don't fully buy as a relationship with Barbara, but that whole kind of sequence in I think it was part 5, was brilliant. Yeah, really good one. Really liked, and I was really surprised by how much I liked The Reign of Terror. So I'm going to give this one 8.5 out of 10. I think if Marco Polo had visuals, I think it'd smack this one out of the park. I think it'd be phenomenal. But just for Reign of Terror being found, I think I'm going to put it better. I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. Okay, everyone, so that's my story-by-story review of Season 1. So I was quite surprised going through some of these as to how I thought some of these better. I think there was a lot of 6s in there, and the average rating, by the way, which I'm going to do for all of these, the average rating for Season 1 was 6.9. Now, that is, I would have thought it to be a little bit higher, you know, before doing this video, but I think that's probably fair. You know, it is the start of the show, and I think it's a season that everyone has to see just for that. Obviously, it was made just over 60 years ago now, some of these were, so there's a lot to learn from these ones, and I think going forward there's a lot of improvements. But this is a very strong season of Doctor Who. I'll say that, and it got 6.9. It's a good season of Doctor Who. I would say anything over a 5 is alright. So 6.9, it's decent, and I think, I'm not sure if it will stack up to be the weakest Hartnell season. I'm not sure. I do need to finish all the other seasons first, and I want to try and do these videos in order. I don't want to jump about and then go to like season 4 next and season 8 or whatever. I want to try and keep it in order. So I will get on finishing season 2 as soon as possible. But yeah, it's a season worth watching. Standouts, Marco Polo, Reign of Terror for me. The Aztecs you guys might really like. Everyone else raves about the Aztecs. I don't really see it, but yeah, you might like it. And, you know, the first 3 are always worth seeing just because it's the beginning and it comes in a box set. But yeah, so, it's my first video. So, I don't know if I came across really awkwardly. I really hope not. But If so, I'm trying to work on it. I've got to get used to this whole being in front of camera thing. But yeah, I'm really, really excited. I had a lot of fun making this, actually, and talking about my opinions. And next up is season 2. Whether I only do this series, I'll try and post some other videos in between to space it out, and it also gives me more time to watch season 2 as well. Whether I make some videos on the modern era or some other bits. But yeah, anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.